I've been a roadie for nearly a decade, lugging amps and guitars for bands that teeter between obscurity and stardom. It's a tough gig, but the perks, free concerts, the occasional backstage pass, and the intoxicating chaos of live rock and roll, make it worthwhile. But there's one show I'll never forget, one that still makes my hands tremble every time I touch a sixth string. The night I worked for Crimson Howl. Crimson Howl wasn't a household name, but they had a cult following. Their music was raw, aggressive, and tinged with an eerie undercurrent that unsettled even their most die-hard fans. They weren't like other bands, there was an edge to their sound, a haunting resonance that didn't just shake your bones but gnawed at your very soul. I got the gig through a friend of a friend. The band had an impromptu show in a forgotten venue deep in the Appalachian foothills. It wasn't a place you'd find on a map, but the fans, those rabid, devoted fans, seemed to know exactly where to go. The venue was called the Devil's Stage, a dilapidated theater shrouded in fog and legend. Locals claimed it was cursed, a place where performers disappeared, their music echoing through the surrounding woods long after they were gone. We arrived late in the afternoon, the sun barely piercing the dense canopy of trees. The band was already there, their gear scattered across the stage. Crimson Howl's lead singer, Vince Graves, was a towering figure with hollow eyes and a voice that could both soothe and terrify. He barely acknowledged me, too engrossed in tuning his battered Gibson Les Paul. The rest of the band was equally strange. There was Mara, the bassist, who never spoke but played with a precision that felt mechanical, almost inhuman. Eddie, the drummer, had a nervous tic that made him twitch constantly, except when he was behind his kit. And then there was Dax, the lead guitarist, whose fingers moved across the strings as if possessed, conjuring riffs that sounded like screams from another world. As the sun set, the fans began to arrive. They came in droves, emerging from the woods like shadows come to life. They were an eclectic mix, leather-clad punks, corporate types in wrinkled suits, and wide-eyed teenagers clutching vinyl records. By the time Crimson Howl took the stage, the theater was packed, the air electric with anticipation. The first chord hit like a sledgehammer, a low, rumbling note that reverberated through the walls and rattled the floorboards. The crowd erupted, their cheers turning into a frenzied chant. The band launched into their set, each song more intense than the last. The music was hypnotic, a cacophony of distorted guitars and thunderous drums that seemed to bypass your ears and burrow straight into your brain. But something was wrong. The sound wasn't just loud, it was alive. The notes twisted and writhed in the air, forming shapes that dissolved as quickly as they appeared. The stage lights flickered erratically, casting shadows that didn't match the movements of the band. Halfway through the set, Vince stepped up to the mic. His voice was guttural, almost unrecognizable. "This next song," he growled, "is for those who dare to listen." The band launched into a new track, one I'd never heard before. The melody was haunting, the kind of tune that clings to your mind like a parasite. And then the screaming started. It wasn't coming from the crowd, it was coming from the speakers. Voices, hundreds of them, layered over the music, wailing in anguish. The crowd froze, their cheers replaced by wide-eyed terror. On stage, the band played on, their faces emotionless, as if they were puppets controlled by unseen strings. I tried to move, to pull the plug on the soundboard, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as if the music had paralyzed me, forcing me to watch as the nightmare unfolded. The shadows on the walls began to twist and grow, forming grotesque figures that reached toward the audience. One by one, people began to collapse, their bodies convulsing in time with the beat. The song reached its climax, a bone-chilling crescendo that felt like it would tear the world apart. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. The crowd lay motionless, their eyes vacant, their bodies unnaturally still. On stage, the band stood frozen, their instruments hanging limply in their hands. And then Vince spoke. "Thank you for joining us," he said, his voice dripping with malevolence. "You've given us what we need." The band began to laugh, a chilling sound that echoed through the empty theater. One by one, they turned and walked off stage, disappearing into the darkness. When I finally regained control of my body, I stumbled outside. The fans were gone, leaving behind only the faint echo of their screams. I drove away as fast as I could, vowing never to return. Weeks later, I tried to find information about Crimson Howl. Their social media accounts were gone, their music scrubbed from streaming platforms. It was as if they'd never existed. But sometimes late at night, I hear that haunting melody, faint and distant, as if calling me back to the devil's stage. And I know that somewhere Crimson Howl is still playing, feeding on the souls of those who dare to listen.